Good evening. My name is Juan Thomas. I'm an of-counsel partner at the law firm of Quinteros, Prieto, Wood, and Boyer in Chicago. But tonight I come to you in my capacity as one of the co-chairs, along with attorney Rebecca Sundin and Lauren Dana, of the board of directors of the Chicago chapter of the American Constitution Society. Founded in 2001, ACS realizes the promises of the United States Constitution by building and leading a diverse legal community that dedicates itself to advancing and defending democracy, justice, equality, and liberty, to securing a government that serves the people's and the public interest, and to guarantee against the abuse of law and the concentration of power. Over the past 21 years, ACS has grown to have over 50 practicing lawyer chapters across the country and over 200 student chapters also across the United States. Tonight, we are truly honored to co-sponsor this Judicial Candidates Forum with one of our best student chapters, the NIU Law Student Chapter of ACS, led this year by Catherine Goldstein and Felix Mitchell. They, along with all of the members of ACS here at NIU, represent the future of ACS and the next generation of progressive lawyers, judges, policy experts, legislators, and academics. We have partnered with NIU ACS Law Student Chapter because they are the only law school in the 2nd District for the Illinois State Supreme Court. ACS believes it was important that NIU host this forum and be the place that provides an opportunity for the voters of this district to learn about the candidates running for office, particularly running for the Illinois Supreme Court in the 2nd District. As a resident of this district and a lawyer who practices in this district, I am personally honored to be with all of you tonight. And finally, ACS would not be here without the generosity and support of the administration and faculty here at NIU's College of Law, led by their dean, Cassandra Hill. She is a superstar in her own right, an award-winning academic and a Howard Law School graduate who truly lives up to the motto of their former dean and mentor of Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, who taught all of us to be social engineers and not a parasite on society. She is truly a social engineer. So with no further ado, please welcome the dean of NIU's Law School, Cassandra Hill.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you so much for that. Good evening, everyone. I am Cassandra Hill. I'm the dean, and I'm honored to serve as the dean of Northern Illinois University College of Law. I'd like to welcome all of you this evening, those of you who are here in person with us, as well as everyone that's online, to our candidates forum. Opportunities like these to hear from such a highly accomplished panel are an incredible learning opportunity for our students and the community at large. And as I was thinking about tonight's program, it caused me to reflect on the mission of our law school, to inspire our students to serve the public interest through their legal careers. For a young law school, we are proud to have over 125 judges who are alums of NIU Law. They're either currently serving or have served as judges. That means nearly 30% of our alums are or have been a member of the judiciary, and we have some in the room right now. I believe that not only reflects on the quality, the high quality of our legal education, but also the ambitions and quality of the students that we admit and that we serve. So to our current and future students, those who are here in person as well as online, whether you have judicial ambitions, political aspirations, or whatever you want to do in your career, we are here excited and prepared to be a part of your journey. And programs like these provide valuable insights into the importance of the democratic process, hearing different points of view, and learning about a variety of career paths. Finally, I would like to thank the Chicago Lawyer Chapter of the ACS and our student ACS chapter for organizing tonight's candidate forum. With a special thank you to our second-year law student, Felix Mitchell, who's the president-elect of ACS. He will be moderating tonight's discussion. So with that, thank you again for being here. Welcome to NIU campus. I would say law, we're just right across the street, right across the way, a few steps away. That's where Swin Parson is. But welcome to our wonderful campus, and I will turn it over to Felix.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, welcome. I'd like to say a special hello to Megan from ACS. She's here with us, so thank you, Megan. She's been supporting us in the background. Just so everybody's aware, the candidates received the rules of the forum. So I'll briefly go over them so the audience is aware. Each candidate will begin with 4 minutes to introduce themselves to the audience, an opportunity to give their background, their qualifications, and why they're running for the 2nd District Judicial seat. And then we'll begin the opening round with questions that were sent in from the ACS Lawyers Committee and amongst the students of ACS here at the campus of Northern Illinois University. So they will also have 4 minutes, and then we'll have 2 minutes closing. Katie, sitting in the front, has a 30-second time sheet. She will hold that sheet up when you have 30 seconds. And we're all good friends here, so we shouldn't have a CNN incident where we have to stop or cut anybody's off. Just recognize the timekeeper. And so with that, we, prior to the event, had a raffle, and it looks like our candidates are seated 1, 2, and 3. And so we will begin with Mayor Rotering.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, Dean Hill, Trustee Cornelius, all of you. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I'm Nancy Rotering. I'm currently the mayor of Highland Park. And as many of you know, this district encompasses 5 counties, including DeKalb, but this race will impact potentially the entire state of Illinois. Because of the work that I've done for decades, I was asked by many Illinois leaders to run for this seat, and I'm proud to be endorsed by Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, the Lake County State's Attorney, several members of the Illinois General Assembly, county commissioners, mayors, lawyers from major law firms, policy leaders, Jeff Stone, the former dean of the University of Chicago Law School, where I'm an alum. The list is at nancyroteringforjustice.com. And they reached out to me because they felt that I had the qualifications and the temperament to do this job well. A little bit about me. I've been an attorney for over 30 years. My undergraduate degree is in economics from Stanford University. I then came back to Northwestern, got my MBA, and then went to work for General Motors in Detroit for a few years on their treasurer's office, and then came back to the University of Chicago for law school. From there, I went to practice at McDermott, Will & Emery in healthcare law, focusing on the broad range of everything from tax to real estate to corporate law, with a main focus on fraud and abuse. So I have 4 kids. And in 2009, we marched on City Hall because of a public safety issue in our neighborhood. And I recognized that there was very little representation of young families. It was, mostly men and 1 woman, and everybody was kind of old. So I said, all right, I'm going to run for office. And I ran for city council. And within weeks, it was very clear that there were ethics issues within my city government. And the mayor and I mixed it up for about 1.5 years. And I decided to run for mayor at that point and became the first woman mayor. And I'm now in my 3rd term. I became mayor in 2011. And what I did right after I got into that office was talk to everybody. I kicked management out of the room. We had several whistleblowers, and that led us to do an internal investigation of our own city. We developed a new culture. We focused on ethics and accountability and transparency. And as a mayor, I've focused on worker safety. I've focused on public safety. We'll talk about that a little later this evening. And at my direction, we also took on ComEd, which wasn't doing its job in Northeastern Illinois, and did everything we could working with the AG's office to make sure that we hardened the infrastructure, taking on that utility and getting what we needed. I stand committed to access to justice, and you'll hear us all talk about that this evening. 7 years ago, though, I put that into practice. I started a legal aid clinic, which provides services in Lake and Cook counties. This past year, we provided free legal services to over 1,300 people, focusing on housing, immigration, and domestic violence. My feeling is if you're at risk of losing your home, your family, potentially your life, you need someone to have your back. And we've done that. I also teach. I teach women in American political leadership at Northwestern. And I just want to share a little bit of that with you because I'm running for Supreme Court Justice to build on that record of public service, to continue my work promoting and ensuring access to justice. Upholding the rule of law and making sure that all Illinoisans have a fair and impartial adjudication of the issues that matter most to them are my missions. And so I appreciate again your time tonight and look forward to talking with you some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Judge Rochford.
Good evening, everyone. Such a privilege to be here on this beautiful campus this evening and at this event sponsored by the American Constitution Society. My name is Liz Rajford. I'm a judge in Lake County, and my journey to this candidacy has been broad-scoped and lengthy. I come from a family of public servants who established a model of service above self, and I have aspired to that model every day of my professional life. I started as a teacher, an English teacher, and I've been 35 years in the practice of law. I started as a law clerk to personal injury titan Phil Corboy. I worked in the state's attorney's office, both in the appellate division and the criminal prosecutions. I had a private practice for more than 20 years where I was representing clients in court and also at the kitchen table, assisting them in navigating plans for estates and probate issues. I was also during that same term a commissioner of the Court of Claims, hearing trials, cases filed against the state of Illinois of every type. You can't sue the state of Illinois in circuit court, the special court where you do it. And I heard those trials for more than 20 years. Was also a hearing officer for 4 villages, hearing local issues. And it's been my true privilege to be on the bench I'm in my 10th year in Lake County, where I've been in the criminal division, in the family division, and currently sitting in the probate division, hearing decedents' estates, disabled adult guardianships, and minor guardianships. I have consistently been found highly qualified and recommended by the Bar Association, and I will tell you that my record on appeal is nearly perfect. I've been long committed to fulfilling the Supreme Court's mandate to civil courts on providing access to justice for all people, especially the poor and the vulnerable. That obviously resonates with me, speaks, I think, to every one of us in the room. But it was taking that gorgeous, lofty, intangible and translating it into boots on the ground reality that has been much of the work that I have done. I took the lead on establishing and was the first judge to sit in the first of its kind court in Lake County in family law that was committed exclusively to serving self-represented litigants. We took a broad scoped academic approach originally, set up the courtroom, thought we knew everything. It wasn't until I sat there for a few months that I started to realize the challenges were so much more significant than I had originally anticipated. It's been some of the most satisfying work of my career. I have always been a leader in bar associations, president of my local Lake County Bar Association, on the board of governors of the Illinois State Bar Association, president of the Illinois Judges Foundation, and currently serving on the executive board of the Illinois Judges Association. I feel that's important to be connected to the challenges that attorneys and people in the courthouse are facing, and also judges on the bench. I've been passionate about connecting the courthouse to the community. We've done that in a number of ways. I've co-chaired a program for 8 years called Paging It Forward, where we're sending judges into schools and reading with them, advancing literacy, talking about civics. And in high schools and colleges, 2 programs, Your Future, Your Choice, talking about the potential for criminal contact, and also a program called You Be the Judge, where we put students in the robe, give them real civil cases, and they hear them and they make decisions. And most recently, I'm working on a mental health task force because I see so many families in crisis with mental health issues. The work of the Supreme Court is vast, It requires at its highest level, people with experience in the courtroom, leadership in and around the courthouse, and service in the community and the courthouse. The resume must match the position, and I hope you'll agree that mine does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Judge Cruz.
Thank you. You know, when you speak last, you end up changing what you're going to say because you hear what everybody else says. I'm going to start with Dean Hill. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. It's the first time we've actually met in person today because we've had to meet on Zoom the last couple of years. But when you mentioned that NIU is a young law school, yeah, I honestly don't consider it that anymore because I have the privilege of being on my home turf tonight. I'm a graduate of class of 1995. I believe that NIU was a young law school back then. I don't see it that way anymore. And when you mentioned 125 judges that are graduates of the College of Law, I'm proud to be one of them. And I'm just going to go back into how I ended up getting here because, you know, I'm basically a naturalized citizen. I was born in the country of Panama while my father was serving in Vietnam in his second tour of duty. I was there because my mother wanted to be close to her family while she gave birth to me and raised my older brothers. Thankfully, my father came back safe from his second tour of duty, and I lived all across the country as we moved every 3 years. While he served the country, we were the family that supported him and his mission. One of the duty stations we had was up here at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and one of the reasons I came back to Illinois is my oldest brother graduated from Waukegan East High School, which is up in Judge Rotering's neighborhood, and he decided to come to school in Aurora University. So when I went to college, I would spend my summers up here trying to make money so I could pay for school, and I slept on his couch for those 3 years and ended up deciding to stay in Illinois. And I applied to a number of law schools in Illinois, several of them downtown Chicago, and then this little school out in DeKalb, Illinois caught my attention. I had not even applied here yet, but my spring break of 1992, I decided to pay a visit. Didn't have an appointment, I just stopped by. And I was welcomed with open arms. Judith Malin was the director of admissions, I think at the time, and she gave me a tour. And I told her my story, exactly what I told you about all the places I've lived and all the experiences I've had growing up in the military family. And when you move around, what you learn is no matter where you live, and I've lived in all parts of the country, whoever's your next door neighbor, that's your best friend. Doesn't matter, boy, girl, female, male, transgender, no matter what culture you came from, that was your best friend. And although I hated moving every time we moved as kids, I learned over time as an adult that it made me more resilient. It made me learn to adapt to new circumstances. And it made me accepting of everything. When I walked around the law school, Judith Malin was telling me about the mindset of what Northern Illinois College of Law was like. And you just touched on it, Dean Hill, is the sharing of different points of view, the sharing of different ideas, cultures. I went to school with individuals like Felix, who were in their second career, some that were retired from their career, some that were homemakers and decided to come back to law school. When you put all those different backgrounds in the same room and you're participating in that Socratic method, the benefit to that education, to having all the different points of view come to you, was priceless. One of the reasons I decided to come here, and I tell students all the time, this is the best value law school in the country, because I could have gone to some of those other schools that were older, as we might say, and had maybe more name recognition, but I would have graduated with 10 times the debt, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to choose a job where I could serve. I would have had to choose a job where I had to make money versus choosing a job where I could invest myself in my community and work hard to benefit the people around me. And that's what I did after I graduated law school. Started my own law practice for 17 years, represented the underserved part of the Aurora community, Hispanic individuals who couldn't speak English. I guided them through every aspect of the law and every courtroom in the surrounding counties. And since this is an opening statement, it's what I get the opportunity to tell you what I hope you learned tonight. That my experience as an attorney, as a community volunteer, and as a judge over the last 26 years is the reason I'll make the next best Supreme Court justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll start with the questions, same rules, 4 minutes. Katie will give you your 30 seconds. We'll begin with Mayor Rotering and then progress on down. The first question is, what will you do to improve access to courts and the court records?
Thank you. So let's talk about the barriers facing so many people who feel that they need to go to court or may not even realize that court is an option for them. Most don't know how to begin. Many don't have the money to hire an attorney. Maybe language is a barrier. Maybe they have a physical disability or mental health is a challenge. Whatever the case may be, they may not have access to computers or they may not know how to use the computers that they have. So let's first we decide what the problem is and then let's unpack what the solutions can be. And the good news is that we know that the Supreme Court Commission on Access to Justice is prioritizing this issue and has laid out great principles in its 2020 to 2023 strategic plan. But we need to make sure that there's funding and we need to make sure that the implementation is prioritized. And so as we look at these ongoing challenges, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are principles that are focused on equal access, procedural fairness, assistance, plain language, process simplification, technology. This is all laid out in the Supreme Court's commission. So let's simplify and reform the process if we can. Let's go to plain language because so many folks are just right out of the gate stopped in their tracks because they can't even figure out what's going on, which forms to use, who to start with. Let's improve the user experience at the courthouse, have navigators, have signs, have a simplified form process, a unified form process. So if you go to one courthouse or another, kind of like Target, you kind of know where you're starting and know what your process is and know what you need to be doing next. Let's train and let's educate the stakeholders at the courts and our justice partners to create this culture of service and to give people improved access to representation. And you heard me talk earlier about the legal aid clinic that I started, and I'll be bringing that refrain back throughout the evening. To me, that is one of the greatest barriers and one of the most important things that we need to talk about, providing the resources so that everybody has access to justice. Let's promote alternatives to going to court and figure out how to get folks into mediation or alternate dispute resolution. And let's talk about community outreach. I am a mayor. I've been in elected office now for 13 years. I know how to do communication with the community and how to educate folks and how to bring them along so that they feel that they can once again feel that they can trust the system. So many folks who have to go to court or even hear about court can't relate to it or feel like it's the man. It's somebody who's got the odds stacked against them. So let's do our best to make it a place that people can feel trust, feel welcome, and that's incumbent on all of us. We need to provide those resources, and we need to put those various principles that the Supreme Court Commission has put into play into implementation.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So I've been actually living this for the last couple of years, and it's very close to my heart. And as I touched on earlier, the Supreme Court issues these lofty mandates across the state of Illinois, and they are powerful and they are meaningful. Actually taking those mandates and translating them into boots on the ground reality in courthouses is something that when I was assigned to do it in Lake County, creating the first self-represented litigants courtroom in family law, as I said, we took an academic approach. I read about it. I saw what other courtrooms were doing, and some of the exact things that Mayor Rotering has mentioned are the things that we were going to implement in the court. And the day that we opened those doors, I thought that we had anticipated everything. We had signs, we had the best courts personnel, we had the courtroom located in a spot that was going to be easy for people to navigate in and out of. So many things, resources, people, interpreters available, court staff that spoke multiple languages. We had court mediators, volunteers from the Bar Association. We had thought of everything. But it was sitting there day after day and realizing the magnitude of the challenges that people were actually facing in the courthouse, that it started to settle in on me that there was so much more involved. And I actually started, I would regularly send people places like to the Department of Health and Family Services, for example, for child support help. And they'd come back frustrated time and time again, or sometimes they'd stop coming back altogether. It wasn't until I actually went to those locations myself and realized how hard the place was to find, that I wasn't sending them prepared to those locations with the documents that they needed, that they could have gotten in the courthouse. I wasn't realizing that sometimes when I was giving people instructions from the bench, that they were so nervous and so overwhelmed with everything they care about most at risk, their family, their children, their homes, that they could even repeat back to me what I had said, but by the time they got to the door, they had forgotten everything because they're in basically a state of shock. So anyway, we've learned so much over the course of time. And then I have had the privilege over the last 2 years to serve on Supreme Court committees where we're translating all that we learned to jurisdictions around the state that sometimes don't have the same resources that we do. And what I've learned in that process is that these beautiful, lofty mandates that the Supreme Court issues look differently from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So the things that we learned in Lake County and the resources that were available by volunteers and because we financially had access and because of the size of our district, our jurisdiction, I can share with them what we learned in smaller places or bigger places, but when they translate it into their own community, it's going to be different. And that's okay, because access to justice can look a whole bunch of different ways. It's just important that we're doing it. And so what I have learned through this process is how important it is to have the leadership at the top that is issuing these mandates and suggestions about how to go about it, the people on the ground to actually translate it and to be constantly learning through the process. There isn't a day that you suddenly got it right. You're always going to be making it better day by day by day, and then sharing that information with other communities so that they can implement some of these same things and make it their very own to match their own community. And so on the Supreme Court, I think having that broad scoped experience of the top, the bottom, and the in-between is critically important to truly affecting access to justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Cruz.
All right, so I'm going to agree with both Mayor Rotering and Judge Rochford, and I as well have been living this again as I finished off my comments before. Being in law and practice of law for 17 years and practicing in multiple counties throughout the area, you learn the best practices of all of them. And when I became a judge, and I was sworn in 2012 as the first Hispanic judge in Kane County, I was sworn in as an associate judge. Now, those are judges that are appointed by the elected judges. And within a few years, the Supreme Court recognized my abilities and the work I was doing, and they escalated me to being a circuit court judge. They unanimously appointed me to a position. I filled out someone else's term, and I won my own elected term. Now, what does that mean? I have a hard time explaining it to my mother at times because she doesn't really understand. But what it really means is that when you're a circuit judge, you're in the decision room. You have the ability to now be a part of a hierarchy that gets to make policy. So what will I do? I'm going to continue to do the work that I've been doing, and mostly what I've done over the last 2 years during the pandemic. First of all, we have the obligation to continuously work to find solutions to problems that are obvious. And that doesn't always happen because we get caught up in the rut of doing what the people before us have always done. What I've done, having been a business owner for 17 years and understanding what the value of money needing to come in and money goes out, all has a value. And when you work for the government, it's an entirely different process. So you start figuring out what works and what doesn't. Where's the waste? Where's the production? And I talk when I go out to different places, we overuse the phrase thinking outside the box. I've been telling people that over the last 2 years, I've been working to reinvent the box because the world has been turned upside down. We now practice law in a way differently than we've ever practiced before. And had we gone before the public before the pandemic and said, let's do all of our court on computer monitors, we would have been laughed out of the room. But we were forced to be uncomfortable. And because we were uncomfortable, we had to innovate. We had to do things to make the system work for the people that we served. I was the presiding judge, again, as a circuit judge, responsible for policy of the family court division. And when my chief judge told me I had to shut down for 60 days, I said, I can't do that because the people that I serve deserve to have access to us. I need to make sure that those children are taken care of. I need to make sure that the finances are accounted for. And the pandemic was going to affect those two things more than anything else. So within a week, I rewrote the rules for our division so that we could remain open. Didn't have my own computer at home. I was borrowing my wife's laptop. Didn't have a Zoom account. So I would get kicked out during my call after 40 minutes and I would tell everybody, re-sign in so we can keep doing the business that I'm here to serve you for. I could have sat at home, collected my check and done nothing. Every week I was looking for ways to improve ways to make sure I was accessible to the people that I served. That's what it means to reinvent the box. And we've been doing it ever since the pandemic started in multiple ways. I've moved to the criminal division. I've done things there to help the individuals as well. That's what you do. Beyond that, being a circuit judge, I get to choose now who the new associate judges are. When I became an associate judge, I was the only Hispanic in Kane County. 9 years later, we have 5 appointed Hispanic judges. We have an African-American judge. We have an openly gay judge. We have an Indian American judge. That's what it means to be in the decision room. You can change minds, you can change policy, and it's translated now into, we now have bailiffs of color in our courtroom. We now have deputies in our courtroom, state's attorneys, public defenders, because everyone sees that the judiciary leads and they follow by your example. So as I started bringing in quality applicants to become judges on the bench, everybody else followed lead. So now when you talk about access, nobody walks into the courthouse in Kane County and doesn't see somebody that looks like them. And that means that they can at least feel that they're represented in one fashion or another. That to me is what access to justice is all about.
Thank you, Judge Cruz. Our next question, it sounds like something we've asked in Civ Pro or in one of our professional responsibility classes. So Mayor Rotering, are there any rules of professional responsibility or procedure that you would propose to revisit?
Yes. So under the Illinois Code of Criminal Procedure and frankly, the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution, we know that every person charged with an offense shall be allowed counsel before pleading to the charge, or in other words, guaranteed adequate representation. And unfortunately, we know that in the state of Illinois, there aren't sufficient resources to provide public defenders to those who need them. And we end up with people who are self-representing, who may be suffering from a mental health crisis, who may be dealing with addiction, who may be dealing with so many other issues that they have gotten themselves into this situation and are the least people we should be expecting to represent themselves. So in my view, we need to address this failure of ensuring people's constitutional rights.
Thank you. Same question, Judge Rochford.
So the rules of professional responsibility are Supreme Court rules, and they are about 70 pages long in the book that I have on my desk that I refer to regularly. But it's in the preamble, that 70 pages, that talks about attorneys' responsibility to provide quality of justice, which every time I think about that, I think about the power of that it's our job, that's our product, that's what we are required to do, to bring to the world quality of justice. And so that means a whole great variety of things. It means when you're representing a client, informing them, advising them about consequences, about their legal rights, about their obligations, advocating for them, evaluating for them, negotiating for them, to be competent and diligent and be communicating. It's interesting that I think the number one complaint against attorneys is their failure to communicate, to be in touch with their client. Clients can take bad news, they can't take no news. There's nothing worse than not hearing from your attorney. So I will say that when I look at the rules of professional conduct, I am always very open to modifying things and hearing how things can be made better. But I don't look at it with an eye to selecting things and changing it. What I would say is, let's focus on the beautiful concept of all of us, judges and attorneys, our responsibility being to deliver quality of justice. That's what when we take the oath, and I think one of the things that's so wonderful now, it wasn't true when I started law school, is that you take an oath as a student when you begin law school. You are a part of the legal community the day that you make the commitment to attend law school. You are being a part of the commitment to the quality of justice that is in the preamble of the professional responsibility rules. And that carries through all the way through every year that you practice. So I think the focus should be there on educating people, talking about, realizing that it's not about winning every case. It's not about making the biggest pile of money. It's about quality of justice and the broad, expansive scope of what that means, both on the bench and as a practicing attorney.
Thank you. Judge Cruz?
So I don't see when the question asked about procedures I was proposed to revisit. I don't know that we propose things. I think we may want to reinforce certain things. Civility definitely is one of them, as Judge Rochford indicated. Thankfully, I practiced in all these surrounding communities. Again, this area is one of the most amazing places to practice where, I could do a jury trial and be fierce and advocate for my client in the courtroom, but still go outside and shake hands, whether I win or lost, with my opponent. And I did that on a regular basis as an attorney. When I think about procedures I want to change, I'm going to go right back to reinventing the box, because when I left the family division last year and I was then placed as a presiding judge of a criminal division, again, we got into the habit of doing things like we've always done them before. And this pandemic has taught us that the world has changed, so we have to adapt with it. The Safety Act is going into effect next year. Most of you, whether you believe or don't believe it's a good idea, it's going into effect. And it's going to let people get out of jail and not be charged any bail, because we've learned over time that individuals sit in custody and they lose their jobs, they lose their livelihoods, they lose maybe family members, their apartments, because they can't afford to post bond, and they plead to something that might cause them to have long-term consequences. And so the legislature has decided that's going to be what we implement starting January 1st. But that exists with people who are outside of custody too. And I saw it with my own clients as an attorney, because the way we ran the criminal courtrooms is every month an individual had to appear in front of a judge. And for those first 90 days or 120 days, nothing happens other than the exchange of paperwork. But you know what my clients would tell me? We got to get this over with, because I just lost a quarter point at work because I had to come to court today. I lost a half point now. I lost a point. If I go one more time, I'm going to lose my job. So I need you to get this case over with. And I can't get the state to dismiss it. I can't do a trial on a moment's request. They just want to plead, because guess what? They don't want those permanent consequences of losing their employment, the impact on their families. So it occurs. So what did I do within a week of taking over a criminal courtroom? Again, I'm the presiding judge as a circuit. I supervise 5 other judges. Immediately within 2 days, if you were represented by an attorney on a nonviolent offense, you don't have to come to my courtroom anymore until you have something of substance that's going to happen in front of me. Because why are you sitting on my call, paying your lawyer to work for you and losing money at the same time? The likelihood is there's probably going to be negative consequences for your being in court to begin with. Why am I going to increase those negative consequences by making you lose work and worry about your livelihood? So we don't do that in my courtroom anymore. And actually, we've started changing the narrative within our building in Kane County where everyone agrees. Why did we need to see people before for that long, every month? There was no purpose behind it other than that's the way we always did it. So now in my courtroom, I only need to see a person once, and that's when the case resolves either by a plea or it's going to trial. That's it. And so they can worry about their job. They can let the attorney do the work that they're hired to do for them. We have to change the way we work procedurally so that we benefit the users of the system. That's where we have to start putting emphasis on, again, not thinking outside the box, reinventing this box, because this is going to be a part of what we do from now on. We tried to transition to talk to the attorneys in our county to see, once the pandemic started lifting a year ago, did they want to go back in person? Did they want to stay on Zoom? Resoundingly, they loved being in Zoom because it gave them more flexibility. It gave their clients more flexibility. It made them happier. So we made that decision a year ago. I might get in trouble for saying this, but it just happened a month ago that the Supreme Court came down and said, we're encouraging everybody to use Zoom now. We made that decision a year ago because we already saw the benefit of doing it, and we already made the decision that it's going to be permanent. I think I can take that case across all of the counties in this district and make it to them as well, because once you see the benefit to the users of the system, the litigants as well as the attorneys alike, it's a win-win. There is no reason not to go back to the way we did it before when you realize the benefits of how we're doing it in Kane County right now.
Thank you, Judge Cruz. Mayor Rotering, how do you define a fair and impartial judge, and how would you work to ensure impartiality?
A fair and impartial judge, frankly, is an independent judge. And we know that that's somebody who isn't swayed by internal or external pressures. One who takes the responsibility to fairly apply the rule of law very seriously, not representing any interests, and really being dedicated to the balanced adjudication and application of the law. But I believe that given that mission of fairness and impartiality, we also need to recognize that in a democratic society, the judge needs to take into consideration the human being who is before him or her. And so recognizing the very real impacts that his or her decisions might be making on that person. And that's why there is discretion in certain circumstances. I bring a record of over 16 years of what's called quasi-judicial public service. And I've enacted and I have applied and I have shown myself to be fair and to be impartial in very difficult situations that we may get to later on this evening. But let's also be clear. This very situation that we're in right now, having a judicial election, kind of brings that whole question into play. If we need to get the voters to participate, we need to talk about things that may be questionable in terms of issues, in terms of positions, in terms of past positions. That's something that then leads people to start to doubt and question how impartial the candidates are when they get into the courtroom. And there's another piece to it, which is this bizarre fundraising approach where so many candidates for this position are calling up, or their committees are calling up, the very lawyers who need to appear before them. So I think if we're talking about fair and impartial judges, we need to really look at this premise of electing judges. I think that in and of itself is going to cause problems in terms of that process, then implicating those who end up being elected.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So being in a courtroom and treating people fairly and impartially, I mean, there's some basic things that a judge is responsible to do, like be on time and be prepared and treat people respectfully. But one of the things that I have learned from actually sitting on the bench also, and through judicial education and through self-examination, is that a judge needs to be both aware of and acknowledging of his or her own, they call it implicit bias and they call it unconscious bias. And we all have it. And it's not something that is easily overcome. In fact, it really can't be overcome. We have to kind of train ourselves, teach ourselves to recognize it when we're doing it and find ways to address it and do better. But it's part of the fabric of who we are. And so as a sitting judge, there are things that you just unintentionally and unconsciously react to. It can be the way someone looks or the way they're behaving or the accent they use or the language they speak. It can be such a great variety of things. And recognizing when your emotions run a little high or when you are quick to a judgment and taking the time to step off the bench or to reread a transcript for real facts as opposed to allowing yourself to be emotionally taken on that journey. Those are the kinds of things that experience on the bench help. And also education of judges is so critically important. I will say it's not that long ago that I didn't even really know what that meant. And it's through judicial education and it's through that awareness and self-examination that I have come to realize that yes, there are times that I jump to a conclusion and we can't. I am regularly reminded that even the members of the Illinois Supreme Court, when they are sitting in their courtroom in Springfield, on the back wall, there's a Latin phrase. It's audi alterum partem. That translates to hear the other side. And the reason I think that's so powerful is that the justices of the Illinois Supreme Court need to be constantly reminded at the back of the room to really hear the other side, to hear the entirety of a case on both sides before they jump to a conclusion. And so I think that's part of the journey, is first acknowledging that these things are real, they exist for all of us, and we're human beings, but we have a very important job to do. We're held to a higher standard. And also just finally, that sometimes also even the appearance of bias. So you may not be acting in a way that it really is biased, but the way that you operate in your courtroom can present the impression of bias to other people. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's things you don't even think about. That's why you need to be constantly examining of yourself and the way that you run your courtroom, because you can give the impression to other people that it's a very clubby place, or, when they walk in, when somebody walks in, a litigant scared to death and feels that they are an outsider in a courtroom and that other people are at an advantage, whether they are or aren't, just that appearance of bias is a dangerous thing, and it undermines the credibility of our judicial system.
Thank you. Judge Cruz?
Thank you. For us judges, I agree with Judge Rochford. I think our Supreme Court and the judicial education we receive goes to great lengths to make sure that we're constantly reflective of ourselves, to understand those implicit biases. And early on, after becoming a judge, I went to a conference, and I remember there was an African-American judge who had been on the bench for a long time, who gave the presentation. And he's talking about implicit bias, and it dawned on me, being again the first Hispanic in King County, he had someone run statistics for him of how his sentencing rates were for different crimes and different individuals. And surprising to me and to him, he found that he was tougher on African-American defendants than he was on non-African-American defendants, when in his mind, he thought it would have been the other way around. And it dawned on him that he expected more of people that were like him. And it was awakening for him. And as an early, a young judge, it was an awakening for me too. And that we see ourselves as individuals that are going to be fair from the start, but we have to realize, like Judge Rochford said, that we're, based on our experiences, we have these predispositions to think a certain way based on some of our surrounding environments and stimulus. But it was eye-opening for me to constantly have that in the back of my head, to not expect any more from anybody, depending on what they look like or what they dress like or anything like that. I spent 8 years in the family division in Kane County. That's the longest anyone spent in the family courts in Kane County. It is a high conflict adversarial environment. And one of the things that I tried to train myself was to not be labeled as a certain kind of judge. Because you'll have lawyers say, oh, he's a dad's judge, or he's a mom's judge, and he has a tendency to do this, that, or the other. And I kind of took a little bit of pride that I was seen as both. There were people, unfortunately, well, for them, when they lost, they thought I was the other kind of judge, right? And so when they won, it might have been, then I was their kind of judge. But that's basically, that's the job, is that you have to make sure. But ultimately, when you're in that high conflict situation, the way you help improve the fair and impartial reputation of a judge is you let people participate in the process. First and foremost, whether they're represented by an attorney or not, you have to give them their day in court. Even if they may not know the rules, the process, you can't practice law for them. You can't put their case on, but you can help them get out what's important to them, let them say their piece. And then even if you don't rule in their way, because the law is going to dictate ultimately what we're able to do, you explain to them how the law applied to their particular facts and circumstances. So they understand that even though they didn't win that day, that the law did apply fairly to them. And most of the time you'll get them nodding their heads. You'll get them to understand that at least you considered what they told you, you applied it to the laws you were instructed to do, and that they didn't win that day, but at least the process was fair. That's really where you start gaining that trust of a fair and impartial judge, is that people leave there thinking, I was able to participate in the process.
Thank you. Mayor Rotering, our next question is, the pursuit of justice is expensive and very small number of people are eligible for free or reduced legal fees. What ideas would you have for improving access to justice in our state?
My favorite question. Thank you for asking it. So let's start with the premise that very few are eligible for free or reduced cost legal services. That's due to lack of resources. As I mentioned, when I introduced myself, I founded a legal aid clinic 7 years ago, and we're focused on housing, immigration, and domestic violence cases. I would love for them to expand to expungement. What a great opportunity for so many folks who are just getting started in their lives to get that fresh and new start, but we can't because our resources are limited. And I would love to see a statewide court-led legal aid system. When I started this legal aid clinic, I spoke to several states attorneys and we all agreed, this is a failing, this is an opportunity. There's an adage in government, budgets reflect our priorities. Where you put your money is where your values are. So if we're talking about equal access to justice for all, then we need to prioritize it and we need to put the money behind it.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So this is a real thing. We learned statistically, not just in Lake County, but across the state of Illinois, at least 50% of new filings in civil cases, family cases, for example, are made by self-represented litigants. And I first didn't know exactly who those people were, and I think we had some expectations about who they were. Again, it wasn't until I was sitting in the courtroom and saw these people coming in every day. These were working people that, were hardworking people working jobs, of great variety, but did not have the opportunity to hire attorneys for $300, $400, $500, $600 an hour, an absolute impossibility. But still, these were people that had everything that they care about most at risk and were desperate to have their issues resolved. So, one of the other things that was an early criticism when we were creating this self-represented litigants courtroom was that we were taking money and out of the pockets of attorneys or business away from attorneys. I can assure you, these are not cases that people could have any ability to hire an attorney. So that wasn't the case at all. What we also realized is that by treating them fairly and by helping them move their cases more efficiently, we were helping the attorneys in the courtroom too, because their cases were being heard more efficiently and there wasn't this delay in the courtroom, and then people weren't paying their attorneys $500 and $600 an hour to be sitting around while self-represented litigants were trying to navigate the system. So it starts with the most basic things, as we discussed earlier. I mean, signage and the right staff and the location of the courtroom, collaborating with your local bar associations and having volunteer mediators, applying for grants, things like I even had scented diffusers in the courtroom to make it a little more pleasant for people when they came in. And things like we created a thing called a prescription pad, and it's the simplest thing in the world. But when I'm sending somebody somewhere, I would check off where they needed to go and what they needed to have when they got there. Just those simple kinds of things. And as Judge Cruz mentioned, taking a minute to explain what the next steps are, or what the process is going to be, or when you've made a ruling, what that ruling was, and how you got there. So somebody said to me in a critical way the other day, we were just at Judicial Education last week, and I was teaching a course on addressing issues, impediments to justice and self-represented litigants. Somebody said, well, those are all just Band-Aids. And, those are just little one by one, little Band-Aids, but it's not really affecting the bigger picture. And it's true. We're helping people one person, one case at a time. I think that has a greater impact than people might realize. But also in the process, we're learning how to do it better. And then we're sharing that information. We're also doing things like, I went to our Lake County board and asked for funding to have a self-represented litigants coordinator, which we now have a full-time person who speaks 5 languages and assists self-represented litigants all over the courthouse in every kind of civil case. And not only is she available in Lake County, because not every county has the resources for those kinds of positions, but she is regularly connecting people to the right people in courthouses all over the state. We need to it starts in the courtroom with the most basic things. And I will say this finally, I was speaking at a college, and one of the students said, gosh, Judge, you had to have a whole committee to figure this stuff out. Isn't this the most obvious, aren't these the most obvious things in the world? Like have a sign and I said, oh my gosh, you're right. These are the most obvious things in the world, the most basic things. If we had asked the people who were in the courtroom, they could have told us, but we weren't self-examining, and we're doing better.
Thank you. Judge Cruz?
Yeah, so you have to make the most of the resources you have. Now, there's 2 impediments. It isn't just legal services, but sometimes just being able to afford paying to file something in the court system and get your case started is an impediment as well. We have, we follow federal poverty guidelines. We can waive partial fees, complete fees, but it's not always a welcoming process for individuals and sometimes it's easier for them to walk away than to even start that process. So that would need to be addressed. The legal aid clinics are amazing. When I started my law office with my partner, it was just me and him, a full-time receptionist and a part-time secretary. And 17 years later, we had 7 lawyers and almost 20 staff. And, people would call us a legal aid clinic because we encouraged all of our attorneys to take cases. So we would routinely get referrals from Prairie State Legal Services and Administer Justice and all those agencies out there, primarily because we were all fluent in Spanish. We would take those clients that couldn't go anywhere else. And then we would build that into part of our practice. And we've been able to translate that throughout Kane County and get lawyers to buy into that mindset as well. That it isn't just, the business of practicing law as an income. It's also the business of giving back. Because I think there's a service component for everyone that goes to law school in one fashion or another. And it translates throughout basically all the areas of the law as well. But as I started off saying earlier, excuse me, that you need to examine where you're spending money too, because if you can improve on your resources, then you have more opportunity. Our Kane County Law Library is basically the self-represented litigant hub for Kane County. And when I was telling you before that I was rewriting our procedures so that I could create more access, I didn't send anything out until I went to our law librarian and said, how does this help our self-represented litigants? Does this do enough for them? Because they're going to have the biggest challenge of anybody. Because they're not going to have someone guiding them through the process. And so we took into account what their needs as well. So I'm just going to touch on money for 1 second, because this was very near and dear to me. Being a fluent Spanish speaker, when the pandemic started, and actually since I became a judge, I'd been trying to reinvent how our interpreting services throughout Kane County, and I didn't have a chance to do so until the pandemic happened. Again, in the face of adversity, we found opportunity. And with Zoom, the advent of Zoom, I learned that we in Kane County were spending almost $500,000 on our interpreting system, all the interpreters we were hiring, and we had 0 certified interpreters. The highest level interpreting in the state is certified and then registered. We had 0 certified, we had 1 registered, and the rest weren't even tested to do anything beyond that. We were spending $500,000. Now you think about the cost of that. The cost of a case goes on appeal and the interpreter was responsible for something going wrong. So I asked the chief judge for permission to try and do something to reinvent that. And I took the bold step of going in front of the county board and saying, the users of the system here deserve to have the ability to have someone that translates accurately what they say in front of a court. Imagine any of you who've traveled overseas, you get in trouble, you have no idea why, and nobody's there competent to tell your side of the story. We weren't experiencing that in Kane County. So with the advent of Zoom and some reimbursements that we could get from the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, we reinvented how we did that. We brought in-house an interpreting coordinator so that they can then coordinate all our interpreting needs. We went Zoom so that we wouldn't have to pay for travel costs, mileage, and minimum hours spent in courtrooms. And we were able to get reimbursements for the state as well. So I'm proud to tell you that in February of this year, we became in Kane County the first and only circuit in the state to have 100% certified interpreters. So our quality went from 0, actually from 1 to 100%. And I waited for the numbers to find out what happened in the year 2021, because if we had to spend more, it was worth doing. When we got the budget back, we saved $270,000 to the Kane County taxpayers because we thought, again, reinvented that box. So that money now can translate into something else. What can we do with that money that for decades we were ignoring and just doing the same thing that we had always done? That's what we have to do on a regular basis, is reinvent this box so we can do things better because the users of the system deserve it.
Thank you. Mayor Rotering, what is the most complex legal issue you've ever worked on in your career?
Thank you. So in 2013, the state of Illinois passed concealed carry. And as part of that, they gave home rule municipalities a 10-day window in which to pass an assault weapons and large capacity magazine ban. And this was obviously right after Sandy Hook. And we as a city council looked within and said, we need to make this statement. We need to move forward. We're going to go ahead and pass this law. But we recognized there was every chance we were going to be sued by the NRA. So I worked with my corporation counsel. We looked at what had already passed muster in the courts, and we looked at what hadn't. And with incredible speed, we drafted a very nuanced but very clear ordinance that, of course, was challenged. The minute we found out that we had been challenged, and the case is Friedman versus the city of Highland Park. I reached out to our Senator Durbin, who put us in touch with the Brady Center. They provided us with pro bono legal representation. And we all worked together in terms of, first, we got sued in the county court and we had a venue change to federal court. We prevailed at the district court and then of course got appealed to the Seventh Circuit. And in the Seventh Circuit, Judge Easterbrook wrote the opinion 2-1 that allowed us to continue with our assault weapons ban and large capacity magazine ban. Because, and I should add, the NRA then tried to take us up to the Supreme Court and writ was denied. So it still stands on the Seventh Circuit. Because the Illinois General Assembly also only provided that 10-day window, there's now state preemption. So no city can pursue the exact same ordinance that was deemed constitutional in our case. So I've spent the last several years working, testifying before the Judiciary Committee and continuing to pursue, trying to get the state to roll back that weird 10-day window opportunity and then allow other cities to take that action.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So during the course of 35 years, both as an attorney and as a judge, I have been involved in a number of very complicated cases, including medical malpractice cases and multi-million-dollar business disputes. But there's unquestionably for me, the cases that always pose the biggest complexity and challenges are the ones that involve human beings. Most typically those that are especially vulnerable, children and disabled people, who are so significantly at risk of being compromised. And when I sat in the family division for 6 years, the cases that were always the ones that I still carry with me to this day, the ones that I worried so significantly about making those right decisions because they are so impactful, not on just that one child, but on that child's entire future and everyone around them. Families don't live in silos. Families are part of communities, and one child's complex issues can affect that whole family and a much greater community. And making those difficult decisions and always trying to do the very best and right thing in the interests of a child, those are the cases that I have always found to be the most complex. The ones I worried about, the ones I still carry with me to this day. But it's also some of the most satisfying and important work of my career. And I'm, ever hopeful that those kinds of decisions have resulted in positive and powerful impacts for families. But sometimes it's things like good parents on two sides of a case, but one has an opportunity to relocate, for example. I mean, and that may sound like a simple thing, but when you think about allowing one parent to remove a child from a jurisdiction away from another parent, even though they have good reason to do it, and you think about the sacrifice and the complexities that result for that child, for the distance and lack of access and all of those things, very difficult decision. So I guess in sum, I would just say that the most complex and most challenging cases of my career are always those that involved human beings rather than money, especially children and vulnerable people of any type.
Thank you. Judge Cruz.
So I'm going to share two. One is an attorney and one is as a judge. The one is an attorney. My current state senator tells the story better, but she was a social worker at the time and I was an attorney. It was the night before Thanksgiving and I get a call from the family of a gentleman I represented who had a disabled daughter who was non-communicative. And unfortunately, the mother of the daughter suffered from an illness where she kept kidnapping the child, taking the child to hospitals and having these sexual abuse tests done on her on a regular basis. And she would find ways to manipulate the system and get last second orders of protection to try and just escape with her. And so I get this call, it's late on the night before Thanksgiving. I rush out of the office. So the most difficult decision I had to make that night was I willing to get arrested to save this child? Because when I got to that house, the police were there, ready to enforce the order of protection. I knew that if that child left with that mom, we would never see that child again. And, you watch some of these things on TV and you think it can't be real, but it was real for me in that particular moment. And I blocked that door and I looked at those police officers and said, I'm sorry, but I can't let you take this child, because if you do, we're never going to see this child again. And they were assessing what I said, and I was wondering why I said it at some point. But I quickly said, I just need you to give me 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. Let me try and track down the duty judge. If I can track down the judge who's hearing this case, maybe we can get a different resolution. But I'm telling you, we'll never see this child again if you allow this lady to take the child with her. So I called every assistant state's attorney I knew in DuPage County. I tracked down who the duty judge was, and then tracked down the judge who was hearing it. And by that time, it was about 8 o'clock at night, and the judge said, everybody meet me down at the sheriff's office, the police, bring the child, bring everybody. And the judge sat down. She undid the order of protection that this lady was able to do last minute with the judge that had no idea what the history was. That was a difficult decision to make because, again, at that point, I didn't matter anymore. At that point, the only thing that was important to me was that child who was non-communicative, who had been through so much trauma, that I made that choice that my career, my livelihood, none of that mattered other than protecting that child that particular day. And I think those experiences helped me when I was in the family division as well, because as Judge Rochford said, making those decisions for children, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you have one parent that the child won't be well with, and it's just an easy decision. But a lot of times it's very close, but the law kind of does support you there. And you know that two parents that are good parents will work that out. But the law has changed now, but I can tell you that as a young judge, I don't know how many of you have pets or dogs, but I'm a dog lover, and I have 2 pets of my own. I'm allergic to both of them. And my wife and daughter will get rid of me before they get rid of the dogs. I've already been told. But I had a case before the law changed where 2 people were fighting over a dog. And before the law changed, a dog was just like a piece of property. It could have been a couch, could have been a lamp, could have been anything else. And here I am with my implicit bias of being a dog lover saying, what am I going to do here? And I took a break and I went and talked to some of my fellow judges. They said, oh, they all had a story as to how a judge had done it in the past. Put both parents on both sides, put the dog in the middle, have him call it and see who he goes to. And, different things like that. And I just thought to myself, no matter how stressful my day is, I go home and I see those wagging tails and those puppy eyes, and I forget everything. So I just started having a conversation with the parties, who feeds them, who walks them. And for the most part, they were both given the same answers because they knew more or less what I wanted to hear. And then I finally said, well, has either one of you thought about giving the other one, money to buy a new dog? And one of them raised their hand and said, yeah, I offered him $600. And I said, gotcha. Because I would never take money from my dog. So I was able to give the dog to the other person. But the law changed and the law evolves because now the law does look at a dog in the shape and the form of a child. Because we do have that emotional investment in them. And now we can actually give visitation and things like that too. So knowing that you have a strong feeling, but the law doesn't support your ability to do that, those are some of the more complicated decisions you have to make.
Yeah, I love my dog, so I can't. You just made me want to call home, check on my dog. Our next question is, in terms of qualifications and judicial philosophy, how do you distinguish yourself from other candidates in the race, and what makes you unique? We'll start with Mayor Rotary.
Okay. I think the clearest distinguishing feature is my experience and my perspectives. The issues that I face, the skills that I use as a mayor, holding hearings, following rules of procedure, ensuring due process, understanding issues, gathering evidence, and then adjudicating complex decisions that it can impact one or thousands of people, translate very well to this role of being on the Supreme Court. And so many of the matters that come before the court, I feel I'm uniquely experienced to adjudicate as well, whether it's using my 11 years of working with the police, the work that I did last summer and continue to do with the General Assembly around the Safety Act and criminal justice reform, understanding workers' comp laws, understanding public safety pension laws, understanding how to address constitutional issues. I've stood up to major players, whether it's the NRA or the utilities, and I have a record of strong ethics and transparency and independence. And so as we move into this new era, this overdue new era of criminal justice reform, we need someone who recognizes and understands the very real need for additional resources for pretrial services, for public defenders throughout the state. Somebody who understands and has had experience working with the police and working with others on issues of mental health and addiction and trauma. And I've been a part of the Lake County Coalition to Reduce Recidivism. I take action to improve access to justice. I don't just talk about it. And as I mentioned earlier, the creation of that legal aid clinic, and frankly, that interest in expanding access to legal aid throughout the state. Every single one of my complex and difficult decisions have been under the public's gaze. Every single one. We are on TV. We have people. I'm running meetings. People are watching. The press is there. And I've always maintained my commitment to fair and impartial and just decision-making.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So I first want to say that I have great respect for my legal colleague, Mayor Rotering, and great respect for my judicial colleague, Judge Cruz. And I will also tell you candidly that I never in my wildest dreams imagined a run for the Illinois Supreme Court. It was not something I ever considered. It was only when this map was redrawn, and it was the first time this map has been redrawn since 1964. It used to be 13 counties across the top of Illinois. It included DuPage County. It was a very different district. And based on changes in population, this map was redrawn. It was reduced geographically to 5 counties, and it created an open seat for the Illinois Supreme Court. I think that's historically unprecedented. And it was only in that moment that I started to examine my journey over the entirety of my life, and also 35 years in and around the practice of law. And I realized that my steps had taken me very naturally to this place and for this candidate, although very unexpectedly. And it's the broad scope and the entirety of my professional career, starting all the way back, in the state's attorney's office, and having been a private practitioner, having worked for the state of Illinois in the Court of Claims and for local villages, and currently sitting on the bench, and the leadership roles that have been so critically important to maturing and to understanding the challenges that are faced by both judges on the bench and also attorneys practicing in the community, and bridging from the courthouse into the community, and really understanding the impact of the courts so that I'm better prepared to serve them if I wasn't in the schools regularly, if I wasn't in the community regularly, and talking about these issues of courts and civics. It's kind of the entirety of these things that, as I say, lead me very naturally to this place. And it's the combination of extensive experience in and around the courts, extensive leadership in and around the legal community, and service that is related both to community and also to the courthouse. I think that you uniquely qualify me for this very high position.
Thank you, Judge Cruz.
I'm going to echo Judge Rochford's comments. I have ultimate respect for Judge Rochford and Mayor Rotering, and for all of us being in this race. I think it's going to be a historic opportunity for this district, being a new district. My candidacy just being on the ballot as the first potentially the first Hispanic Supreme Court justice that we might have in the state of Illinois, because we have had none through our history. And the demographics across the state would dictate that we should have someone. I think that the important qualities, again, as I talked about before, my unique background, experiences, upbringing, my legal practice of being on the opposite side and seeing access to justice from the people who maybe denied it more by most, and then being on the bench as a judge now in my 10th year, the opportunity to reinvent and broaden minds, create inclusion based on my performance and the example that I set for other judges. Most importantly, I think, as I mentioned before, When you're a circuit judge, you're a decision maker. Just like in King County, we have 14 of us that make decisions. Now, it falls on the presidings, which there's 4 of us, who pretty much guide the course of King County as far as the judiciary and the things we seek to accomplish. It's the same thing the Supreme Court does at the state level. That's where I think the experience is most closely tied. But I can tell you that I've been recognized by my peers because of the work that I've been doing. I teach at the Judicial Education Conference. I just taught there last week. I've been doing that for several years. I'm now a cohort mentor for new judges. So new judges, when you get sworn in within that first year, you have to take some judicial classes on top of your Judicial Education Conference every 2 years. So I'm a cohort leader. So I'll be down in Springfield in the first week of May with 9 new judges that I mentor across the state. We participate in trainings together. I give them, the opportunity to reach out to me if within their own circuit they can't find someone that they feel comfortable talking to, they can come to me. So I've been recognized by my peers at the state level to say, Judge Cruz, we see what you're doing, and we want to share with our new judges the experiences that you have, the knowledge that you have, the training that you have. That was recognized recently as well. The work that I indicated we were doing on Zoom, I was able to present to a panel across the country, to judges across all 50 states, on how we were doing the Zoom call in Kane County, where we were staggering calls, how it's an ever-evolving process, how to bring stability to the individuals who, may not be taking the Zoom process as serious as they would the actual courtroom. So I've had those opportunities for individuals to, those at the highest level of the state recognize my work here in Kane County. And for a lot of people, they don't even realize that Kane County exists, that we're so far outside of Cook, but they recognize my work and they've sought my leadership to teach others. And I think that's the biggest recognition that you can have. And I'll share with you that after I taught my course last week at the Judicial Education Conference, there was a judge from the first district of Illinois, which is way down at the bottom of the tip of Illinois. They're not even Cub fans down there. They're Cardinals fans because they're so close to St. Louis. And there was a judge who was standing around as I was packing up and talking to someone, and she was waiting for me. And I greeted her with some pleasantries, and she said, I was trying to figure out who you were. We've never met before, but I've heard your name, and I finally realized where it was. And, so you wonder, is it for a good reason or a bad reason, right? You hope it's good. And she said, during the pandemic, we weren't able to get our work done down in this county, because there's a bunch of counties in that district down there. And I called someone from Kane County because I heard that your family division was churning. And she said, go look at the administrative rules. And she started looking at all the administrative rules, and she saw Judge Cruz, rewriting the rules so that we could keep the wheels of justice moving. And she said, that's why I remember your name. Someone I didn't even know, who's trying to do the same thing we were doing in Kane County, was able to use what we put into place to make it work for them. That's the exact same job of the Supreme Court justice, to show the things that work to the others so that we can continue that doing again for the people that we serve.
Thank you. This is going to be our final question. So this is going to come from our students. The question is, what advice would you give a current, a present or future law student that would like to become a judge?
First of all, I would say really study civil procedure and criminal procedure. Make sure you absorb it through osmosis, and then have a real understanding of how it actually works. These are required classes. First years sort of slog through it, and I don't know that they understand the real nexus between the book and the reality. And I would say sit in on court cases where you can. Obviously, you want to experience and understand the broad range of what's available and the very real impact that the courts can have on people. Again, I think we've talked a lot tonight about how for so many folks, courts are mysterious places. They just can't relate to the judiciary. And we've seen this on the campaign trail. People are like, what do judges do? And how does this affect my life? And why should I be paying attention to this race? So to students who are thinking of becoming judges, do all of that and make sure that you're learning what it actually means to then implement and provide access to justice.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So, gosh, I think, seize every opportunity for, especially anything that you are really drawn to. If a door opens and we were discussing earlier that sometimes you have a preconceived notion about what it is you'd like to do in law. And then once you get involved in the practice of law, opportunities present themselves, and sometimes they're very different than what you thought they would be. And sometimes they're just wonderful and so expanding and so challenging. I think seek good mentors, reach out to people that you admire, and don't be shy about it. People are usually so eager to help and be of assistance. And even if it's somebody that's very lofty, you know, and I also would say be very involved in bar associations, local bar associations, and on the statewide level. It's a wonderful way to have great camaraderie, to be a part of the process. We have the former president of our Illinois State Bar Association here tonight, somebody who I so greatly admire and had an opportunity to serve on the Board of Governors with him. So critically important to the entirety of the profession. You know, I think that I am so proud to be an attorney. I am so proud to be a part of the legal community. Service is such a significant piece of that too. Find the things in service that really genuinely speak to you. Don't sign up for it because somebody told you that might be good to, you know, maybe you can be a judge if you sign up for that. Follow the things that are really genuine to you, and you will enjoy them. You'll have enormous impact. Get engaged in leadership. Be generous. You know, we're always striving to pull ourselves up. Do that. But then also take time to reach back and help the next person up. So it's those kinds of things that I think, you know, and then again, just seeking good mentors, people that you respect, and seek their good advice and follow it when they give it to you. I'll tell you this one quick story. We had a woman in our bar association who went to law school when she was 78 years old. And when she began practicing, she volunteered. That's how I met her, because she volunteered at our guardianship help desk. And the same year that she turned 90 years old, she was honored by our bar association with the Young and New, it's the Young or New Lawyers Award, because if you can be practicing under 35 or practicing less than 10 years, she was practicing less than 10 years. Her name was Agnes Prindeville, and she was, I mean, she's so exceptional in so many ways. But it would have been a lifelong dream for her to go to law school. And at 78 years old, after having raised 7 children, having worked in computer science as a professor, I mean, done all these remarkable things, she went to law school. Anyway, when she was going to get the award, I thought, gosh, we need to spread this good news beyond the boundaries of our own county. And I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I wrote a letter to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to tell her about this jewel that was in our own community. I sent it off and I never thought about it again. About 10 days later, on my desk was a letter from the United States Supreme Court, from the desk of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, it wasn't for me, it was for Agnes, who was being honored. But to even have it pass through my hands, and what it made me realize is that even people in these very high positions are always willing to reach a hand down, to congratulate, to acknowledge other people. And so, you know, do it on the way up, and then reach back and do it for others who are on their way up. That's my advice.
Thank you. Judge Cruz?
Remind me, was the question law students or lawyers?
Law students.
Law students, right? So I would tell you, when I went into law school, I went in with a certain perspective of what I wanted to do. And then I wanted to be a criminal, either defense lawyer or prosecutor. And I went into my first year of semester of criminal law, and I said, I never want to do this. And I just, you know, that's what I thought I wanted to do. So the first thing I would tell you is figure out what you really want to do. And I had the benefit and luxury of, in between my first and second year, I was given the, it was a summer associate position at a large firm downtown Chicago that they would always pick someone from NIU, and I happened to be that person working at a 300 lawyer firm, Gardner, Carton, and Douglas down in downtown Chicago. I still lived in DeKalb, so I'd have to catch the train at 4:30, drive to Geneva, get on a train there, get there, and then I'd come home, go to bed, do it all over again the next day, and usually drive in on a Saturday morning to fulfill those duties. But I learned right away that I did not like that kind of job, and it had nothing to do with the commute. That was a place where you just sat and wrote and never saw a person ever. And I knew that I'm an extrovert, so I need to interact with people. And I saw that the associates who were lawyers there, they just never saw the sun and they never saw a single client. And that's not what I wanted to do. The next year, I worked for, actually during the next second year of school, I worked for a PI firm. I had a chance to write memos and show up in court and do a few things. And my interest in court started to come back a little bit. Then I got a second 11 position with the Kane County State's Attorney's Office. And once I got into the courtroom, that fire of wanting to be there lit up right away. So I had to experience some other things first before I found the place that I knew I wanted to be. I then, right across the street here, signed up for trial advocacy. Judge Dara, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was a DuPage County judge and then ended up being a federal judge, picked me for his mock trial team. And we had an opportunity to compete in Chicago against a number of large schools and held our own back in 1994. And that love for litigation, that love for being in the courtroom came back. But I had to, again, experience those different types of jobs in order to figure out where my passion was. I tell people before they go into law school all the time, do not become a lawyer because you want to get rich, because you can make a comfortable living, but you have to work incredibly hard to get there. So if you don't love what you're doing, it's never going to be enough money for you and you're going to work harder than you think. So you got to do it because you care about what you're doing. You care about the people you're serving. So you want to do it for that reason. And I have a daughter who's a first-year law student right now. I tried to talk her out of going to law school initially because I wanted to make sure it was what she wanted to do, not what she wanted to do because of me, but it was her passion. And thankfully she's doing fabulous. And it does look like it's something that's right in her wheelhouse. And I'm anticipating that she's going to change the world someday as well. When I've gone into the schools and talked to children at all ages to tell them that when they look at me, they should see themselves. And I did that as an attorney because we had very few Hispanic attorneys in Aurora with the large Hispanic population. And I was being asked to apply to be an associate judge for a couple of years before I ever decided to do it because I had a successful practice. I was happy with what I was doing. I was very involved in the community. And once you become a judge, you have all these restrictions that keep you from doing some of those things that you're passionate about. And it was my chief judge, Judge Keith Brown, who was the first Black judge in Kane County, who convinced me that the impact I could have by being the first Hispanic judge would just give me a higher pedestal from which to reach individuals with that message. But I had to have a successful legal career. It had to be a diverse legal career. It had to be I couldn't step in front of anybody and said, appoint me because I'm Hispanic. I had to step in front of them and say, look at my application. I'm the best qualified candidate that you have.
Thank you, Judge. This is the final step. So each candidate will get 2 minutes to present a closing statement. And so we'll start with Mayor Rotering.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you, Dean Hill. Thank you, Trustee Cornelius, NIU, American Constitutional Society, and everybody else who is in this room. Judge Rajford, Judge Cruz, it's always a pleasure to see the two of you. We have a unique opportunity to bring about a fresh approach to judicial leadership with this race. And it recognizes diverse perspective on the bench, one that recognizes the qualities of a good Supreme Court judge don't necessarily have to follow the typical pattern that we've seen in the past. And this is an opportunity for an experienced leader like myself in public service to bring skills, to bring experiences, to bring perspective, and to bring my commitment to public access to the judiciary. We lost a great jurist in Justice Kilbride in 2020. He was a champion. He was committed to access to justice. He was committed to fairness on the judiciary. And he also had never been a judge before joining the Illinois Supreme Court in 2000. I'll bring a strong legal education. I'll bring over 30 years of experience, both in private practice and in public interest law, but also bring a proven record of achievement as someone who's been committed to public service, to diversity, to equity, to inclusion, and to justice. And so I thank you so much for your time tonight. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about who I am and why I hope you'll agree that I'm the best person for the job. Again, I'm Nancy Rotering. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Judge Rochford.
So first I want to, Dean Hill, thank you so much for having us, and Assistant Dean Mitchell and President Mitchell. Such a pleasure to be here tonight. It really inspires me because I know the future of our profession is so bright when I see people gathered to talk about the courts. And Sometimes you'll hear that people don't care about the courts or they're not interested in judicial elections. Well, you've just proved that tonight. People do care, and it does matter. I'm not going to, I think you've heard enough from me. I'm going to invite you to visit my website, which is Judge Rajford for Supreme Court. I'm hoping you'll learn more about me at the website, but I especially want to alert you to an article that is in the news section of the website. It's an article that was written by a former colleague of ours in Lake County, Judge Ray McCoskey, and he is an internationally renowned ethics scholar. And he recently wrote an article that I think is just so important to share, and it's called Campaign for Judicial Office Different by Design. These are different elections than other things. This is not like running for the legislature or running for the executive branch. It's different, and it explains how it's different, what judges can and cannot do on the campaign trail, and why. Because in maintaining judicial independence, in maintaining judicial integrity, we are keeping the balance of democracy. So I invite you to read that article, and while you're there, you can learn a little bit more about me too. And I thank you so very much for your kind attention tonight.
Thank you. Judge Cruz?
Yes, similarly, I want to thank everyone, all pun intended, for inviting me back to my home court. It's been a pleasure to be back here again. The years I spent here at the College of Law were some of the most rewarding of not only my career, but my life. I can tell you, my personal belief is that I think the next Supreme Court justice, there's no experience for time on the bench for our next Supreme Court justice. I think that the things you learn and making decisions on a day-to-day basis. Now understand, what we do on a daily basis gets appealed and appellate courts hear that. Now we make decisions on the spot. Sometimes we just have seconds to make decisions. And then it goes in front of a 3-judge panel who has a staff of attorneys, Kate, who will spend weeks picking apart our decision that we made in a few seconds. But we take on that responsibility willingly, and because we know the importance of the work we do. And there's a mindset that you get into when you do that job and you're serving others. Right before the pandemic, I've been so invested in my community. My wife and I were awarded the Champions Against Hunger by our local food pantry because, again, it's not just what we do at our jobs, it's what we do in our community. And it's very important for me for my community to know that I'm just like everybody else. When I'm not on the bench, we shop at the same stores, we eat at the same restaurants, and I'll mow your lawn when you're on vacation just as much and enjoy it just as much because you're my neighbor. So that's the mentality we have to have. You have to be invested in your job and invested in your community as well. And during the pandemic, while I was doing all the things that I was telling you about, my bar association gave me the Community Service Award too, because I was juggling that commitment to the community. I walked in, some of you may have seen me, I was wearing my mask because I'm gonna go visit my father in Florida soon. My wife, who didn't know how to sew, put together a team of individuals to start making masks during the pandemic because there were none. And I was the guy who had to drive around to all the Joann stores to find fabric because you couldn't find it, and elastic because you couldn't find it. And through her group, which she called Sew More Love, we gave out almost 15,000 masks for free to first-line workers and others. Someone made the comment that the Cruz family is part of the fabric, pun intended, of our community. And I think that's what really matters is, no matter what position you're in, like Judge Brown told me, when you become that judge as a Hispanic, it's going to give you a pedestal for which you can have influence and improve the ones around you. It's only going to get better and bigger at the Supreme Court level. So I appreciate your time. Judge Cruz for Justice, or choosecruz22.com. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the ACS NIU chapter and the lawyers chapter, on behalf of Dean Hill and Assistant Dean Mitchell, our trustee, and the Greater University, NIU, and College of Law, we thank each of you for participating. We hope that either out of all three of you should have the seat. We'd be greatly served with you on the Supreme Court here in Illinois. And we also welcome you back to visit our law school, participate in our mentor program. Let me put on my ambassador hat. You can also donate to the law school should you choose to do so.
Very smart.
But thank you very much for taking the time. I want to thank Katie, Ashley. I want to make sure I thank Megan for helping us put this together. And as law students, we really appreciate that All of your campaigns took our invitation seriously. That tells us a lot about your character and the type of judge that you are or you will become. And each one of you has taught us something about character, determination, hard work, and community service. And we thank you, and we look forward to seeing you here on the campus sometime this fall. So thank you very much and safe travel.
Thank you.